There is a battle happening right now in the markets that happens every single year at exactly this time between the bears and the bulls going into the summer. Now, most often, the bears do win and prevail through the fight, and we experience what we call the summer doldrums, okay? And that's where the seasonality, the negative seasonality of market periods during the summer tends to override. The bears win, and the bulls don't have the best summer. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And in today's video, I'm going to break down the summer doldrums and the seasonality of markets and what that means for our portfolios as investors. Okay, so first of all, what does market seasonality actually look like? Okay, so I have this graph pulled up on the screen that shows the seasonality of Bitcoin specifically. All right, we're going to talk about the stock market in a few minutes, but we're going to focus on Bitcoin first. Looking at Bitcoin, we can see the seasonality, average monthly performance, and guess what? Right in the middle of the chart, the summer months, the middle period of the year is where we see the least overall amount of performance, right? Starting in June, we have a big significant decline. July usually looks a little bit better than June. And then we have August, which is flat, and September, which is usually red when it comes to performance, right? So we see that the summer slowdown, or summer doldrums in this case, is a really real phenomena in the world of crypto investing, specifically when looking at the Bitcoin chart. We can see that the best parts of the year to be invested are from October forward all the way into the new year into about April and May, right? The old saying, sell in May and walk away. Now let's talk about this period, the summer doldrums, in more detail so you guys can understand what exactly I am talking about, of course. And second to that, how can we actually position ourselves to take advantage of this usual summer slowdown that we see? And the summer doldrums itself is referring to the period of summer where we see a usual slowdown in trading volume and very sluggish market activity during these months, right? During the summer, I talked about this in a video, this one right here, investors usually log off, traders log off, institutions take holidays. I mean, not many of them anymore, but this has been the trend for many, many years at this point. And we see fewer major market moving events, less earnings reports, less sort of impactful news releases. And usually we do see a lot slower market activity. We even see slower economic activity outside of tourism and sectors that sort of really light up in the summertime as people want to go on vacation. But what this ultimately means is that the slowdown of markets also leads to a slowdown of returns for investors, right? Because we don't see stocks growing as much. We usually don't see crypto growing as much. And when we have this reduction in growth, we have this reduction in volatility, we have this reduction in volume, everything sort of just goes quiet over the summer. Whenever news does break, it has massive impacts and implications on the market because it can rupture through thin liquidity very, very quickly. When you see unexpected headlines, when you see political events, geopolitical events, big moves being made by central banks, like we saw last summer, for example, we can see massive movements in these markets during a period of time where most people are logged off and have no idea what's happening when they scramble back to their desks and wonder what's going on with the volatility of the market. So this is the summer doldrums, right? It doesn't have to happen every single year. We see this reduction in trading volume, we see this slowdown in growth, and we see this boring summer. But just so you know, it happens more summers than not, all right? I mean, the seasonality of Bitcoin from August 2010 all the way to April 2023 shows you that this is a very real scenario when it comes to the world of cryptocurrency investing. Now, you may be asking yourself, does this even happen during a bull market? Like, during a bear market, this seems easy, but during a bull market, everything has to keep going up, right? And I wanted to show you guys this article actually from 2021, where we were in the middle of a bull market, sort of coming towards the final stages of one, where this article was written talking about there's a reason it's called the summer doldrums, technically speaking, right? And this is where we were starting to look at higher inflation. Markets were sort of calm, not doing too crazy. And this investor or this analyst wrote an article about this, the QQQ losing a bit of ground, micro caps doing a little bit better, real estate down. Summers are usually very boring for real estate. Summers are usually very boring for many markets and many industries. But you can see even in a bull market, right? Summer doldrums occur. And also many interesting data points that set us up for performance or lack of performance in Q4 also come to light in the summer period. You can see here we started to look at inflation data ticking up massively. Again, this was before the Fed really said it was a problem. This is before they were talking about any rate hikes, which they started to talk about in their November meetings just a few months after this article was written, right? And he's saying here, ultimately the markets are continuing to do not very much. It's not a period of time to log out. It's a period of time in the markets to focus up, look at the data, and of course, position more if you're under allocated or you're looking to add more into your portfolio during the summer season. So I found this is to be a very interesting article from 2021. And I referenced it based off my question of, can we have this phenomenon happen even in a bull market? And the answer is yes, right? I want to show you 2021. This was the summer doldrums in the S&P 500 during 2021. And you can see that we had a relatively good June. Then we had a dip late June, early July. Then we had another dip here late July into August. And then we had a relatively boring August, another dip that started at the end of August. And then September was negative for that whole month until we got towards October and things took off for Q4, right? So again, even in a bull market, the market is still overall making higher highs and higher lows, but there's less overall volume, there's less overall activity, and we do see those increased frequency of sell-offs happening over the summer, usually culminating in an August or September, multi-week drawdown for the markets. If we look at this same sort of period for the S&P 500 last year in 2024, for example, what we can see was, a relatively okay June and July, and then things really started to break down late July throughout all of August. Was kind of crappy, right? We had that big strong bounce, and then September rolled over, not too bad. Last year was actually not too bad for the stock market. It was a lot worse for the crypto markets. Now, even in bull markets, the summer doldrums, they don't look too bad for the S&P 500, right? But when it comes to crypto specifically, right? And I'll always go back to the beginning of this presentation where I was referencing these monthly returns. And you look at June, July, August, and September, and you see almost nothing here in terms of performance, negative performance. If we go back and we look at what we're dealing with here when it comes to crypto, you can see that materialized in the charts, right? You can see it very clearly that during the months of June, July, August, September, we are seeing a big gap of performance in the markets, right? They're not raging higher. They're moving sideways or moving down. Same thing with last year, right? Here's June. Here's July, big pullback, right? Bounce in July into late July, boom, big pullback in August, deeper pullback into September, or back down to the lows, I should say, and not breaking out until October. Well, does that align with the data? If we go back, what we can see is that the first month of massive performance, again, after a boring summer, is always October. Okay, so October is the setup to be getting prepared for. And just to show you that the summer doldrums is a reality in the crypto market. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a ton of opportunity for investors here while liquidity was flowing and altcoins were, sort of trading a little bit separately to the Bitcoin market. There was tons of opportunity to take advantage of if you were paying attention. Same thing in 2024 here, right? A lot less opportunity, but more so opportunity for positioning and for building positions going into the fourth quarter. And look what happened. October rolled around, massive performance. Look what happened here. October rolled around, massive move of outperformance in the markets. And this has many people wondering now, so what should we expect for the summer ahead, right? And I made a whole video about this last week, actually. Crypto summer is coming, or is it? And I painted some scenarios for you guys saying it is very important to watch for two very specific key metrics, okay? Bitcoin strength and Ethereum outperformance. If we are going to have a quote unquote crypto summer, we need to see Bitcoin strength and we need to see Ethereum outperformance, or in this case, continued Bitcoin strength and continued Ethereum outperformance. Now, Ethereum has weakened a little bit recently against Bitcoin. This whole war situation in the Middle East has not been helping the markets. But along with this, what we also need to see for crypto summer, quote unquote crypto summer, to occur is global liquidity continuing to rise, which it looks like it's set up to do so. No sort of sizable black swan events. Again, I wouldn't call this war in the Middle East a black swan event, but if this escalates and gets bigger, the US increases their involvement, we could be looking at a different situation. So we have to stay focused on that. We want to see continued inflows into ETFs, and remember that I'll touch on that towards the end of the video. We want to see a continued consolidation in the dollar index, the US dollar index, the DXY. And I talked about in this video that I posted last week for you guys, I got a lot of messages about this video saying thank you for helping us get prepared for summer. I talked about Ethereum's bounce back, right? Lots of ETF inflows. I talked about the Genius Act and its potential impacts on ETH in the world of stablecoins, 50% of stablecoins being held on the ETH chain. And I reviewed this summer game plan that I had been working on and sharing with members in BNB for the past couple of weeks, maybe at this point, past 2 months or so. And I talked about some specific scenarios, right? Crypto summer, which is what I made the main focus of last week's video all about. You can see a repeat of 2024 where we just get sideways and down and nothing. And then I painted another couple scenarios, which is pull back and run or run and pull back. Okay, but I want to focus on these first two because these first two are the most significant. And in order for us to see crypto summer, like I said, we need Bitcoin strength and we need to see Ethereum outperformance. That is what we need for a crypto summer in order for Ethereum to be able to lead the way, lead the altcoin market, and then some of the altcoins that are on my watch list on the ETH ecosystem to perform and to shine. Now, I'm not just looking at ETH in BNB. I'm looking at many other chains and many other sectors of the market, but this is one that stands out to me as being a strong contender if Ethereum outperformance can happen over the summer months. Now, the data tells us that it's unlikely to occur, right? We're unlikely to see massive performance from this summer out of the markets. But what we do have on our hands is liquidity. We do have a dollar index that's breaking down, and we do have continued inflows into ETFs. So the overall environment right now is still relatively risk on from that massive recovery we saw in April into May after the whole tariff debacle, right? We've seen that strength in the market. We've seen the markets rage back to life. We've seen the breakdown of the US bond market and where that capital has been moving. Some of that capital has been moving towards these markets, moving towards Bitcoin. The main problem that we're experiencing in the markets right now and going into the summer period that may sort of tip the scale in favor of the bears, or maybe not, is the fact that tensions in the Middle East have been escalating. And then, of course, we did see just yesterday a ceasefire announced and essentially the end of the war called upon by many people, but that was already violated today. So what I said to members in BNB is expect some quick and unpredictable moves from the market as the situation in the Middle East continues to unfold and stay on the front page of the news. Now, this could be happening all summer, okay? The moment that it moves off of the front page and it's secondary news is where the markets are going to stop caring about what's going on in the Middle East, and the markets are going to focus on what drives markets: liquidity, flows, fundamentals, institutional adoption and interest in the sake of crypto specifically. But as long as it's front page news, for right now, for the next little while, this is going to continue to impact markets because we've seen that this market this year has been very headline driven. Trump coming out and saying things has been more significant for the market than the actual data that usually drives market movements. Now, one thing I want to show you guys is the Bitcoin ETF and how it's been performing recently. So let me just pull up this link really quickly. We take you to a website called CoinGlass. And we're going to explore what the Bitcoin ETF flows have looked like recently. And what you can see here is all this time we've been consolidating, ETFs have continued to see inflows, right? Pretty light outflows recently compared to the rest of the year. Very light outflows, solid, not massive, but solid inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs recently. So this looks like it's setting us up for a strong continued institutional bid over the summer. It's not guaranteed, but everything looks relatively solid here. And ETH paints a completely different picture, right? If we look at the ETH ETF overview, or not a different, but an even more similar strong picture of where we should be headed, is it looks strong, right? We've seen some massive inflows into ETH and really no outflows from the ETF perspective. So just because this is happening doesn't mean that we have to experience outperformance, okay? It doesn't mean that we have to experience a bullish summer, right? What we need to see in tandem, not just individually, is Bitcoin strength and Ethereum outperformance. That means Bitcoin holding above 100K and pushing towards new all-time highs at some point within the next 30 to 60 days. We want to see that strength, and we want to see Ethereum go on to outpace Bitcoin in the near term, create new highs against its ETH BTC chart, and then the altcoins can follow suit. Okay, so my overall conclusion on the markets right now is regardless of what happens, I am not going to be logging off, and I don't recommend you to be doing anything else either. Because what happens during summers is we either get opportune moments to accumulate, like we saw last year. This is my system, Alpha AI, issuing a moderate buy signal on August 5th last year when the markets broke down. This was about 50,000 on the chart here, 48,000. We saw a moderate buy signal come in on the system after we got a sell signal in the late spring, early summer to de-risk for the summer, this is what we saw was a buy signal occur on August 5th, right? We had lots of low risk readings from our risk metric system, if you're familiar with that. I should have put a screenshot of it here, but nonetheless, this summer presented buying opportunities. And if this summer presents buying opportunities again, you're going to want to be prepared to take advantage of them, of course. Now, if we see the markets move higher from here, if we see Ethereum outperforming, well, you're going to want to figure out how to outperform your current portfolio. Maybe you're holding Bitcoin, maybe you're holding Ethereum, maybe you're holding 30 different coins, which is, trust me, a terrible, terrible strategy. I call it spray and pray. But regardless of that, you want to look for outperformance. How can you outperform Bitcoin? How can you outperform your current portfolio? That's what I will be focused on if the market is bullish. But if the market is bearish and we experience the summer doldrums, I will let the tech take the front seat as always and tell me when to buy, when to increase my risk in my Bitcoin positions, and ultimately when to start rotating capital around the markets. If you guys are looking for more weekly updates just like this video, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting out more and more as the weeks go on. I'm pushing to get to 3 a week. I want to see that you guys want these in the comments before I make that leap. These do take quite a bit of my day to get prepared for you guys. I do post every single day on Instagram. Many of you guys come from Instagram, but if you're not in my announcements channel on Instagram, you're missing out on free game when it comes to crypto, just like this video, but much smaller bite-sized topics to talk about, more related to more instant news. Of course, we have Bull Market Blueprint, which is my private investing mastermind. And what we have coming up actually, which is very interesting, and I wanted to encourage anyone who's watching this right now to join us, as long as it's before June 29th, is I am hosting this War versus Markets Masterclass. You can sign up with this QR code right here. You just grab your phone, scan it. It'll take you right to this page right here. You can sign up. And I'm going to be going over all of the important parts that you need to understand for having a successful summer and combining that with the volatility of potential war, what war means for markets, what opportunities can be created when we see conflict, geopolitical conflict in play in markets. This is happening next Sunday, right? So June 29th, I'm posting this video on the 24th. If you're seeing it before the 29th, scan this QR code. Join me on Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern time for 2 hours. There will be a live Q&A. You can come on and ask me anything that you want. And I will be going on a deep dive for 2 hours straight, talking about the setups for the markets for the summer, the specific niches and coins to be looking at for this summer if altcoin outperformance happens, and of course the accumulation plan if we see the summer doldrums play out and we're looking for buy signals and low risk opportunities to further our positions into Bitcoin before the inevitable Q4. Because, like I said at the beginning of the video, Q4 is where it all happens, right? This is the fireworks, right? This is the victory lap after the fireworks is Q1 of next year, potentially. But Q4 of this year, as we've usually seen in markets, should be very, very positive, especially, I think, for Bitcoin and specific crypto assets. So you want to make sure that you're on the right side of the trade. This is the place to be, to get set up, to learn exactly what we're going to be looking at this summer inside of BNB. And of course, if you want to join us, this is the application link right here that you can pull up your phone. You can scan, you can submit an application. I will take a look over your current situation, your current scenario, your current portfolio, and see if it makes sense for you to join us inside of BNB. If you're a serious investor with 50K or more in your portfolio, this is the place that you're going to want to be, seeing all the calls before they happen, of course. In this case, Coinbase, we started buying in the low 200s, 203, 204, 208. It's all the way up as of today, $330 per share. So all of the important announcements that I'm making and the changes that I'm making to my portfolio in real time are all happening in BNB first before I ever discuss them on YouTube. So if you're a serious investor, 50K or more, this is the community that you'll want to be a part of. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.